be a burger. Putting out a video making a big presumption about Nintendo's financial results mere days before they were due to publish their big quarterly financial report was a bit risky in GL. I knew it was a risky move. I knew that report was coming. The video was about how I thought Nintendo might be in for something of a rough year, and my whole thesis was based on the preliminary sales data from the holiday season. From where we were sitting, it looked like the Switch 2 had sold very well at launch, but then sales slowed down pretty dramatically. Across the board, video game consoles had a very weak Black Friday, and that really is true. Like, we know that the Switch 2 did not sell as well as you might expect over Black Friday, which is traditionally a period of very, very high sales. And then there were the sales leading up to the holiday. They had definitely slowed down at least a bit, which was to be expected between the launch of a system and its first holiday. But then on top of that, you had the simple fact that store shelves are filled with Switch 2s, like just stuffed. These things are everywhere. Anybody can go out right now and find a Switch 2, no problem. Added all together, everything created this feeling that the Switch 2's momentum had really stalled. And I posited that if sales were more sluggish than Nintendo expected, then there was no real reason to believe that things would change until they released some really big games, which probably won't happen until late this year. And if that were true, then it would mean kind of a rough year for Nintendo, especially when combined with the RAM shortages and all that stuff. So that was the idea. And man, I didn't even just predict a rough year in that video. I also built it right into my 2026 predictions video. Based on what we knew at the time, it just seemed really likely to me that this was how things would go. Well, it is now early February and Nintendo did it. They published their quarterly financial report tracking sales through the end of December. The quarterly report is normally a time of great celebration for data enjoyers such as myself, but this time it was a bitter pill to swallow. If you haven't seen the numbers for yourself yet, you may be asking, nay, screaming at the screen, demanding that I answer the question. Did Switch 2 sell well over the holidays? Is it still selling well overall? And most importantly, was Arlo wrong for the first time? Well, the answer to that question is... Okay, let's just get it out of the way. The Switch 2 is still selling really, really well. The launch went so well that Nintendo upped their forecast for the first fiscal year from 15 million units to 19 million units. And since launch, the Switch 2 has sold 17 million units. It is now less than 2 million away from that forecast, and that is after the forecast was raised, and that's only after 7 months on the market. A little over half a year. Sales simply did not stall after launch the way it seemed like they did. Nintendo gave us this graph comparing year 1 Switch and Switch 2 sales. And I will say, this graph is slightly confusing. I'm not sure why it says 15 million when Nintendo's other numbers say 17 million, and if those are weeks on the bottom, counting them from launch means that the end of the Switch 2 line would land in like September. And at the bottom it says that these are only estimates, seeing as Nintendo sells units to stores and then those units are sold to customers, and I imagine Nintendo doesn't always have a perfectly accurate count of that second number. So definitely some weird elements I am not understanding personally. However, I'm not gonna do mental gymnastics to try and spin any of this into a reason why Switch 2 is selling bad, actually. No, these numbers are pretty darn great. So we do have to ask, what gives? Why did it seem like sales had stalled? Why did it seem like they had had such a rough holiday? And then why and how could Arlo be so wrong? Well, it's really funny because the whole point I tried to make in that video was that it's weirdly hard to predict the future, even when all the makings of that future are right in front of us. Even when we can see all the variables, all the elements, all the potential red flags, it's still just so hard to picture how things will play out. Even though when the future gets here, it feels like it was always obvious that this was how things would go. There's this constant feeling that we must just not be very good at paying attention, you know? And I do think that point is valid. I think that is a true thing. If anything, it is proven here, because there was information that I was just not considering. Even though it was sitting right there in front of me. If I'd been really paying attention, I would have seen it, but I didn't. I made the mistake of looking way too hard at that Black Friday data. What I didn't see at the time was this. The Switch 2 didn't sell that well over Black Friday because Nintendo didn't give it any major discounts, right? We knew this, but that just means that if there is no reason to expect a big sales bump over Black Friday, then you cannot use Black Friday as a metric for predicting the overall sales for the period. That is what I was missing. Do you see what I'm saying? Beyond a few limited deals over Cyber Monday, there was no particular reason for a person to go out and buy a Switch 2 that week. Beyond it just like being the holiday season, there was no extra incentive for Black Friday itself. And if Switch 2 only sold a few 100,000 units over Black Friday, maybe 500,000 tops, well, what about the week before Black Friday? Or the week after? Or any of the other weeks over the whole fall and winter holiday season? Well, apparently the system was quietly selling pretty well that whole time. No doubt seeing little bumps around the releases of all those Q4 games. And you want to know another mistake I made? This is a particularly hard one to admit because this is just a pure failing on my part. I made the mistake of predicting based on vibes. And you know, I can't be too hard on myself. This is a trap that basically everyone falls into, even professional analysts. Again, those store shelves were just packed with units. And I really do still believe that the entire game industry is in for some rough times ahead, with the RAM shortages, just everything feeling really scary. I probably allowed those gloomy vibes to color my perception, and I imagined a future that was more dire than the one that ultimately materialized. Okay, but I will say, it's not all good news for Nintendo and bad news for wannabe analyst Arlo. I mean, I fully admit it does sting to be wrong, you know, especially to a 100,000 people or so. Maybe this is just a desperate attempt to save face, to prop up my ego just a little bit, but I don't necessarily yet think that I was completely and entirely wrong. Yet. By no means am I 100% sure that Nintendo is completely out of the woods. While that video I did was kind of based on the assumption that Switch 2 sales were stalling, I think most of what I said is still true. Nintendo is still facing a lot of challenges heading into the system's second calendar year. Component shortages, economic downturn, weak yen, etc., etc. This is all very real. They really may have to raise the price of the system at some point, and if that happens, yeah, there's a good chance that that's gonna have an impact on sales. It is getting harder and harder to convince people to shell out a bunch of money for a fancy new system and a bunch of super expensive games, especially with so many hundreds of billions of trillions of really great, really affordable games releasing and piling up in backlogs every single year. As I talked about, selling products really comes down to psychology. Have you convinced people to buy your product or not? If too many things pile up on the don't buy product side of the scale, then there you go. And Nintendo really does not have any big system sellers coming anytime soon. February is the earliest that they could announce some big 2026 game. And that's if they even have a big February Direct. At the time of this recording, the rumor is that it's just going to be a partner showcase. So whatever gets announced for this year, any huge system-selling games, let's just say it's Smash, like just for the sake of discussion, let's just say Smash is coming this year. It's not coming until much, much later this year, probably the holiday season. I think there is at least a chance that the sales will kind of stall now that the holidays are over. Obviously, the next quarterly report is going to make the whole picture that much clearer, especially if there's a price increase or some other big economic upset makes people even more scared to spend their money, then things could change. But then, on the other hand, if over the next few months Nintendo manages to shift millions of additional units, then I will have been strictly wrong. just absolutely dead wrong. No two ways about it. No buts. My thesis that Switch 2 would struggle for much of its first year or two will be only wrong. And to be clear, just in case you didn't see that video, I never said that the Switch 2 was gonna fail or anything like that. Like, once the games do come, once we get like Pokemon, obviously things are gonna go pretty darn well. I just thought sales might drag a bit leading up to that point, but whatever. Well, my congratulations to Nintendo. Your console is doing very, very well. Although I will also offer my condolences to the Wii U. The faster a system beats the Wii U, the worse I feel for the little guy. I mean, the Switch 2 beat it in under half a year. Oh, ouch. But of course, I offer my deepest condolences to the Nintendo hate tubers of the world. I am so sorry that the Switch 2 is not, after all, Nintendoomed. A moment of silence.